Hey team, Ben Lawless here. I might just quickly show you the new English rubrics that have come from the Ministry of Education and some critiques of them. So we've got three here: informative, persuasive, and narrative. They've all got similar problems, so I might just focus on this one. Right. Okay. So firstly, you'll note that they've all got exactly 5 by 6. I don't see any reason why they need to have the exact same number of levels. I would ask, is the step up in difficulty from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on, are they all equal? When you show it in a grid format like this, it's assumed that they are equal steps up in difficulty, but they're probably not. Is everything at row 1 the same difficulty? Is everything at row 4 the same difficulty? Again, probably not. A much bigger problem is trying to put different constructs in one row. The particularly bad ones here is, oh, this is the worst one here, like writing conventions, grammar, punctuation, and spelling. There's no way that you can measure all of those things at once. Students will not have the same level of proficiency in punctuation as they do with spelling. So what do you do if the student is good at punctuation but not spelling? You can't measure that accurately using something like this. Now I'd like to talk about the language. So good rubrics should demystify what it looks like to get better at something. And when we use language that's not observational, it doesn't do that. So have a look here. It demonstrates an insightful, in-depth understanding of the task. What does that mean? Every teacher that marks using this rubric will disagree on what insightful means. Students don't know what insightful means. So rubrics like these are really hard to mark with because they're full of language that's really ambiguous and not defined. So therefore, for the same reasons, students find it difficult to read them. They find it difficult to self-assess. They find it hard to understand the feedback they've been given. And because they can't assess themselves, they can't mark their own work and they can't use it to drive their own learning. Like they can't say, oh, I got 5. Okay, I need to get better by doing whatever it says in 6 because of the writing. And thirdly, it doesn't provide much support for instruction, and that will become clear as we have a bit more of a look in depth. Okay, so anytime you see understanding, think, know, feel, believe, these are all brain states. We can't measure these directly. We're not mind readers, so we can only assess what students do, say, make, or write. So externally observable things, which are not on here. You've got begin, and then you've got other places. You've got attempt. Yeah, beginning and attempting, again, that's not an observation. That's saying what the student is trying to do. So rather than saying what the student is trying to do, you should say what they actually do, right? So instead of saying attempts to use paragraphing, the students who are not able to paragraph yet, what do they actually do? Do they have one big chunk of text? Then write that. Then that's able to be observed, and we can teach people from that point. But if you just say attempt, that doesn't help. Same with beginning, right? Beginning doesn't tell you what the student's doing. It tells you something else that they're trying to do. Also, with the language, you'll notice that this is written really negatively. Limited or absent, can't do this, few or no. From the learner's point of view, this kind of feedback is felt really negatively, and there's no reason why we should be using negative language to students just because they've got low ability in something. You go up the top here and all of a sudden they're being told that their work is vivid and it's thorough and it's engaging and it's rich, and yet people down here are being told that they're basic and they're attempting and they're failing and they're limited or absent. It's needlessly judgmental. We need to focus on what we can observe rather than putting judgments on students. A really common mistake when people write spelling rubrics is they just try to measure how many errors there are. So you'll see like lots of errors, less errors, no errors. Students will game this system and only use simple language so that they don't make errors in it, which is not what we want. So rather than just count errors, we should think about grouping words in groups of how difficult they are by actual features of them, like the number of syllables they have, or whether they come from a different language, or if they've got irregular spelling patterns, stuff like that, rather than just saying more difficult, You know, it's not helpful. You'll notice there's a whole heap of vague comparative terms in here. Some words, some. What's the difference between some and mostly? You know, I've seen moderation meetings that go on for hours. People are trying to define what mostly versus sometimes versus frequently means. It's not helpful. And again, we've got negative language here. So another really common thing that I'm seeing in here is that we're counting stuff. So it's quantity, not quality. They are very different. We should be trying to measure the quality of what a student's doing, not just how often they do it. From an instructional point of view, if a student can do something, we don't need to teach it to them again. We just need to give them opportunities to practice it. But if we want them to do it every time, then we just give them a reminder. We don't need to measure how often they do it. If you want them to have a topic sentence at the start of each paragraph, that's fine. That can be a checkbox. It's not something that needs to be shown up in the rubric. The rubric should be putting them on a progression of increasing sophistication of performance. So a whole heap of issues here. You know, it's too long. It's not written in student-friendly language. There are no, rather than having, you know, just look at, you know, your typical disengaged student is not going to read a criteria that's that long. And that's, you know, equally really, really difficult for teachers and to interpret, and almost impossible for a parent to understand what's going on there. Lots of problems. Same problems appear across all three types. Language, how the subject's being divided up, blah, 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 blah. These kind of rubrics are really, really common. I've been lucky to work with Patrick Griffin, who invented a method of rubric writing called Developmental rubrics, which is, we believe, much more helpful for learning. If that's something you're interested in, have a look at these. That's a primary example, just one row. And we also put examples of student work under it so that everybody can see an example of what it looks like. That makes marking easier. Here's an example from the final year of history in Victoria, Australia. So you'll notice it's all just vague descriptor terms. You know, it's not helpful for instruction. And what if a kid gets assessed here? Sound evaluation. What do they need to do to get better? Your evaluation, instead of being sound, should be thoughtful or comprehensive. What does that mean? What does it look like? There's no information in this. I worked with the department and we rewrote them, and now they look like this, which has been very successful with students and teachers alike. You'll notice now it's observational. If a student gets described content, what do they need to do to get better? They need to explain the context of it, right? So there's discrete teachable steps from one level to the next. Easier to mark, helps students to regulate their own learning, and can provide support for instruction. So if that kind of rubric looks better than the ones that the department is spitting out, then please feel free to get in touch. There are my details there. Thank you very much.